Welcome to Weekly World News on Spring Nectar TV, brought to you by Vibha Ramesh, Los Angeles, United States. First, the top headlines. Biden warns of increase in COVID cases in lesser vaccinated areas. Israel-Palestine conflict getting out of control. Twin factors lead to labor shortage in the United Kingdom. Cyclone Tauktae lashed the west coast in India. New Zealand to cut low-skill immigration. Now for news in detail. On Monday, President Biden announced that for the first time since the start of the pandemic, the number of new cases of coronavirus is relatively low in all the states. Having said that, he also warned against the possibility of a spike in cases in those states that have low vaccination rates. In his words as he made the announcement, "We know there will be advances and setbacks, and we know that there are many flare-ups that could occur. But if the unvaccinated get vaccinated, they will protect themselves and other unvaccinated people around them. I want to thank the American people who have stepped up and done their patriotic duty and gotten vaccinated," he said. Another announcement came from the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki as she stated that by the end of June, the United States will be sending 20 million doses of U.S.-approved coronavirus vaccines to foreign countries. She also confirmed that this would be in addition to the 60 million doses of vaccines from AstraZeneca that Biden had committed to send abroad. Meanwhile, CDC's announcement of lifting the mask mandate with limitations for fully vaccinated people has stirred up confusion. While Starbucks and Walmart almost immediately responded to the mandate and lifted the ban in their facilities, some others like Gap continued to follow the mask-wearing rule. News has it that nearly half of the states have lifted the rule in response to the announcement, and New York will soon join the league, as can be understood from Governor Andrew Cuomo's statement. "Let's get back to life. If you're vaccinated, you're safe. No masks, no social distancing." Responding to the confusion over the mandate, Dr. Anthony Fauci clarified that the guidance was not a mandate to take off the mask, but was meant to reassure the vaccinated people about the efficacy of the vaccine. And in Los Angeles, nearly 1,000 residents were kept under evacuation orders as a wildfire blazed through vegetation near Topanga State Park on Monday. The fire that broke out on Friday was beyond containment as it flared its way into the Topanga Canyon area on Saturday and had burned over 2 square miles on Sunday. However, nobody was injured and no buildings were damaged. Sources said that the terrain was inaccessible and hence the sudden wildfire seemed suspicious. Over to the Middle East, it's been a week now and there seems to be no respite to the exchange of airstrikes between Syria and Gaza. Early Monday, the UN Secretary General warned that the conflict between the Syrians and the Palestinians is getting out of hand and will soon steer towards humanitarian crisis. Despite the loss of over 200 lives and the call for ceasefire by foreign ministers and ambassadors, there was no sign of even a temporary truce. And if that was not enough, the battle instigated a day of protests by Palestinians, which led to severe clashes in Jerusalem, killing 1 septuagenarian and injuring over 70 people. Moving on, the United Kingdom is bound to face a shortage of labor in the light of twin factors, COVID and Brexit. With the easing of restrictions in Wales and England, the reopening of retail and hospitality sectors, employers are all set to hire at a rate not seen in nearly 8 years. However, with the Brexit deal in the foreground, the professional body of HR and Human Development foresee a decline in the number of European Union workers. Going by statistics from the job website, there have only been half as many job searches from Western Europe and North America as there were before the start of the pandemic. That apart, experts in the United Kingdom have warned that in a matter of a few days, the Indian variant of the virus will become a dominant strain in the country. The high transmissibility of the B.1.617 poses a threat which may lead to reversing the initial plans of easing down restrictions. In another instance, Jenny McGee, the nurse who burned the midnight oil and cared for Prime Minister Boris Johnson, tendered her resignation. Her resignation comes in view of her disappointment with the manner in which the government treated the healthcare workers. She said, "We're not getting the respect and now pay that we deserve. I'm just sick of it, so I've handed in my resignation." Over to Taiwan, The sudden spike in coronavirus cases has called for a partial lockdown in two main cities, including the capital. To this end, Taipei and New Taipei have been put on Level 3 alert system, said the Health Minister Chen Shih-chung. He also announced remote learning for some grades and guidelines for hospitals to prioritize symptomatic cases. Further, he reminded and urged the people to observe hygienic practices and avoid unnecessary travel and interactions. News has it that the outbreak is directly linked to a national airline and a connected quarantine hotel and has been responsible for nearly 85% of locally transmitted cases. Meanwhile, Chile could set a new standard when it comes to women's rights and gender equality. To this effect, women's rights activists are working hard to bring into motion a new constitution which will be a first in the entire world. Yes, this weekend, Chileans will be electing a 155-strong Citizens' Assembly to write a new constitution for the country, one that will set global standards for gender equality in politics. Commenting on the proud effort, Antonio Oriana, running as a candidate in Santiago, said, "It's a game-changing moment, like when women won the right to vote." And in India, one of the strongest cyclones overtook the virus in making headlines this week. Tropical cyclone Tauktae lashed the west coast on Monday with wind speeds of up to 130 miles per hour and made a landfall in Gujarat. Nearly 150,000 people were evacuated from their homes, and by Tuesday the storm had weakened, by which time it had already claimed 12 lives. As Udaya of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies said, this cyclone is a terrible double blow for millions of people in India whose families have been struck down by record COVID infections and deaths. Many families are barely staying afloat. Meanwhile, officials from several states had an intense brainstorming session on Tuesday in which they discussed some best practices as well as new suggestions and recommendations to fight the ongoing battle against the deadly virus. The discussion primarily focused on handling the crisis in rural and semi-urban areas. On Wednesday, Union Health Minister Harshvardhan reassured the people of the government's goal to vaccinate 100% of the adult population by the end of the year. He also confirmed that 267 crore vaccines will be made available to ensure that all individuals over the age of 18 will be inoculated against COVID by end 2021. Another positive element in the COVID-stricken nation is the development of an oral medication that could be used to treat COVID patients. Developed by the Defense Research and Development Organization in collaboration with Dr. Reddy's laboratory, the antiviral drug is expected to be launched by mid-June to hospitals across the nation. Moving on, New Zealand, which has until now been an appealing destination for migrants of all walks of life, is about to see a change. The nation has recently shown an inclination towards the rich as uber-rich speculators bought remote properties in exotic locations in the country. This became more evident on Monday when the government announced that it would be narrowing the scope of migration, especially for low-skill and low-wage workers. In the words of the Tourism Minister Stuart Nash, "When our borders fully open again, we can't afford to simply turn on the tap to the previous immigration settings. COVID-19 has starkly highlighted our reliance on migrant labor, particularly temporary migrant labor. The pressure we have seen on housing and infrastructure in recent years means we need to get ahead of population growth." Over to China. On Tuesday, a 300-meter high building in Shenzhen began to shake without apparent reason. The incident prompted the evacuation of people inside, and the plaza was eventually closed by 2:40 p.m. The building is said to house electronics markets and offices. The cause of the tremor is being investigated, and an earthquake has been ruled out. Culminating this week's bulletin with news from Antarctica. A mammoth slab of ice broke off the frozen edge of Antarctica and fell into the Weddell Sea. Called the A-76, this huge chunk becomes the largest floating iceberg in the world. To give you a perspective of its size, the surface area of the iceberg spans 4,320 square kilometers, which translates to 4 times the size of New York City. With that, we come to the end of this news bulletin. I'll see you again next week with more world news on Spring Nectar TV.